Technology will replace teachers. Or will it? Technology will replace teachers is the topic of my presentation here today. And I'm going to be going over some key terms before. And I want to say technology and AI are two terms I will be repeating a lot in the presentation. So technology is basically anything that makes life easier. It doesn't necessarily have to do with electric devices like phones and computers and laptops and stuff like that. It could be anything. It could be your wallet. It could be your purse. These are things that we created as a society to make our lives easier. And AI is just short for artificial intelligence, which is the knowledge that a computer can contain. And so I'm going to begin with why this topic interests me. And it really interested me because of my own personal experiences with situations where I felt I was being taught more with the use of technology than being in person classrooms. Because back when COVID started and we were all quarantined, I had to go resort to remote learning to get my college education. And I felt like a lot of teachers were underprepared for the situation. And it was a surprise situation for everyone. We had to basically be away for months at a time. It was really hard. And it really showed the effects of what forcing 100%, well, 70% technology can do to a whole education system. And I think it's going to have a lasting effect past what happened. And I felt like many of my classrooms became self-learning experiences, and I was teaching myself, and it was like reading from a textbook. It didn't feel like real technology usage. So when I think of real technology usage in classrooms, I think of situations like this. I think of a robot teaching the class. And I think if you were to ask anyone else this question, technology, or you say that statement, technology will replace teachers, they're going to think of something like this, an AI taking place of a teacher. And pay attention, the video basically shows that this AI isn't a replacement, it's an assistant. It's helping out. It's helping out keep the attention of kids, giving the teacher the opportunity to go and help other kids give more attention to more of her students. And I think this is really what the main focus of this topic should be, is technology aiding instead of replacing. And that I think this is a very important thing to think about, because if we say the statement of technology replacing teachers, it's going to hinder job opportunities. It's going to hinder people going for these job opportunities, and it's going to make future generations struggle to learn the same concepts that are already established now. And it might even hinder the willingness of educators to implement technology in their classrooms, because they could be afraid of being replaced by this this thing that they're teaching. If they make a great game that teaches a lesson, they could lose a whole lesson plan, a whole day. And I'm gonna go over some evidence I found. A lot of my sources started off with COVID. They started off talking about how COVID began this whole issue of technology replacing teachers. And as you can see on the chart, the boom of people displaced, affected by COVID, was in the billions. There's about 300 million people in the United States alone. So that basically means everyone in the United States was affected. Everyone was pushed out into remote learning, and a lot of people had to come face to face with what technology replacing teachers really look like. And a lot of my topics go into this, and it's not only the beginning, because the effects of COVID are lasting to this day. And it's because during COVID, when everyone was online, we saw the school district saw that they were gaining money by, having less to do with teachers, having all these people graduate online instead of in class. They didn't have to focus on a lot of things. And one of my sources really hammered this idea home because they were going and talking to educators in one of these counties that still has a lot of online courses, and basically teachers there are fighting to have their classes in person instead of online. And the fact is they had to try and get a high enrollment into their class to argue that having it in person is worthwhile for the school. And this will go further to show what this situation is going down and creating. It's creating moments that have repeated in our history before. Because in the early 1800s, there was a lot of schools in these low-income areas in New York and Philadelphia, and they were looking for a cheaper alternative to hiring teachers. So they tried to replace teachers with technology, and this technology was the telegraph. And so basically this guy, Joseph Lancaster, came up with the idea of using telegraphs to have one teacher telegraph to a bunch of unpaid child teachers and have them teach hundreds of kids at under one teacher with the help of these unpaid child teachers. And basically what ended up happening is the kids in the classroom were not retaining this knowledge. They weren't getting it. They weren't gonna get it because the child teacher didn't know. He had to wait for the real teacher to talk to him, and it just wouldn't work out. It wouldn't work out like that. They had to get, eventually, New York and Philadelphia hire teachers and put them in those schools, getting rid of this whole telegraph program. And then later, 50 years later, 1950s, educators weren't getting paid enough. And instead of getting a raise, they left. And instead of getting a raise, educators then left for better paying jobs. And instead of, trying to get more educators, trying to give them a reason to stay, the governments in some of these areas thought television, it was an up and coming thing. They could use television to spread education and teach these kids. But how much information can you retain by watching TV programs of what you're supposed to be learning? You can't ask a TV program questions. So this system really crumbled down. Again, another implementation where technology just isn't cutting it to replace teachers. And a lot of my sources really agreed with this idea. They really came to a consensus. There was hardly any confliction. I'm almost certain in all of my sources that I didn't read any single one where they said, yes, technology is completely taking over. And in fact, they almost all agree that it's not going to happen. And if it did, it would be at the detriment of education for future learners. The only times where education was being taught purely by technology was when schools were cutting budgets. And when that happens, it's basically going to go down the same role that past times have happened, that history will repeat itself. And my sources agree with that. And And after all that, I've got to say some surprises that really stuck home with me was the fact that each of these sources really came to an agreement. They all basically said the same thing. Some had more sources, some had more information to spread, but they were all basically coming to that same thing, and I was really surprised. I really thought I would come across something that goes against this grain, and when I did find something, it was that historical article that was going over the failures of what happens when technology does replace teachers, and it really opened my eyes. I think that was like that New York's Times article was the most surprising during all of my research, and I really did enjoy reading through that. And what was also surprising was how often COVID was brought up. I knew it was going to be impactful, but to see the impact was surprising. My personal takeaways from this was I learned that if I do seek a job of being an educator in the future, that's not in jeopardy to be taken away by any future advancements in technology. And the impacts that this will have, I think I will continue my education in the use of technology and really look forward to it for the rest of the semester especially. And I'm really interested in seeing if any of my Web 2.0s can be used further as well.